As I've said many times, we're not working from home through this crisis, but rather living at work. In the early days of lockdown, I think there was a lot of confidence, predictions that we are witnessing the beginning of a remote work revolution. And as the weeks have dragged on, such fancies have quickly proven to be an illusion. I think we're jaded by trying to fit a workday around homeschooling and children and spending too much time with our spouses. And I think for many, there's also the crushing loneliness. I think many workers are desperate to get back to the office and the social interaction. In fact, a recent survey found that 86% of South African office workers are ready to return to their places of work. Similarly, the Wall Street Journal reports that companies are finding that fully remote workforces mean that projects take longer, collaboration is harder, and that training new workers is a struggle. But how do we balance that need for structure with the flexibility a post-pandemic world demands? And what is the future of working from home looking like? We've invited Nevo Hadas, who's a partner at DYDX, to find out a little bit more. Nevo, firstly, DYDX is a digital transformation consultancy. You conducted a study with over 250 respondents just to evaluate how well teams are performing with regards to working from home in their strategies and policies. 73% found working at home more productive than at the office. Why do you think this is the case?
Hi, how are you doing? So I think the reason why most companies have found working from home more productive, and this is quite common across a lot of research you'll see, is because people get to be busier. So there's no gaps between meetings, people are starting work earlier. If companies have evolved to the point where people have time to work quietly at their tasks, you'll find that they're far more efficient in getting work done. And so they've actually found that overall the effectiveness of businesses has really increased a lot over that period of time.
Now, over half, though, said that they felt overwhelmed by the volume of calls and emails and other communication. And elsewhere, it's reported that employees are hesitant to report feeling ill because they're already home. Do you think some employers are unreasonable in their demands on those working from home in an environment like this?
So I think there's two aspects to the problem. I think the one is the level that the employers expect from staff. 100% correct. You're on and you're connected all the time. Where else could you be other than your laptop responding to messages? And the second one is that people that work from home have often felt a sense that they need to work harder and be more alert and be more available than if they were at the office. Because, again, what else could they be doing? And if they're not at home at their desk, they must be kind of shirking off somewhere. And that really has created a lot more conflict for people. So you're seeing that kind of thing. And actually, more often we see that people are worried about work-life balance from the point of view that there is no life in remote working versus from that there is not enough work being done.
Especially at a time when, because of the lockdown, we haven't been able to unplug, go away for that weekend, not until very recently. Now, before lockdown started, I think most people would leave the office and go home. Now your office is clearly at home. As I said, you're living at work. Should there be a company policy just to specifically address downtime, to ensure that we're managing things like burnout? Because I've read some very interesting studies that we're potentially facing a second pandemic of work-related burnout as a result of this.
So I think that's spot on. I think the lack of remote work policies in the research we saw and other research pieces that we've read up on the research we did is a key issue. Only about 26% of companies feel that they have, or employees feel that their companies have adequate enough remote work policies. And those policies definitely do cover things like, when do you switch off? How do you switch off? And the challenges we face with this evolution, because everyone just thinks, oh wow, I'm going to have all the flexible time I want, and it's all great and easy. But the challenges come in that as I start working in a more globally connected workforce across more time zones, the switch off time becomes harder and harder to identify. Because even if I'm working from here in the UK, just that our time difference could mean that I have calls up to 6 or 7 p.m. to fit in with everyone else. And that's really the challenges that a lot of companies are facing right now. How do you define your workday more effectively so people know when you're available, when you're not available, and when the team agrees that they're available? And that's been the shift. I think the shift goes company policy to create an overarching structure, and then a lot of team-focused conversations about, people that are working immediately with each other. What are the times that you're available for meetings, and for kind of what they call synchronous conversations, so that we can communicate more effectively together.
And just listening to that, there is a challenge here, I guess, for management to ensure that people are actually sticking to whatever policy you put in place, because your team is scattered all around your city, your country, around the world. Very difficult to monitor and evaluate whether or not they're sticking to these company policies.
Well, and again, in sticking to it, funnily enough, what we've seen over the last period of time hasn't been, are people shirking? It's, are people actually taking the time off?
Yeah.
Are they actually like stopping the phone calls at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. or are they being bombarded and still doing emails, later hours? That's really much more the problem. And it was an interesting, we did a project 4 years ago with the Dutch government looking at remote working and remote working teams, and this whole idea of, in the future, a lot of people in your team won't necessarily work for the company even, they'll be freelancers, so you'll have this distributed team model. And one of the key aspects that came out from a westernized or developed country perspective is that knowledge workers are on average 25% overworked from a working hour perspective than they used to be. I guess in the industrial age of, the factory workers needed to unionize to reduce their work hours. Nowadays, it's on the other extreme, where knowledge workers are the ones that are working the most hours and extreme hours. And that's almost why you have this problem of trying to manage and curtail this workday, because you're right, burnout is coming, and it has happened already. Yeah. We have seen it.
As we've seen inside Netflix, as a global example, Investec locally, they instituted a self-regulating leave policy, and no one was taking any leave because the company culture and the group ensured that everyone just worked that little bit harder. And in fact, I think, to your point, that's what managers are going to have to worry. It's not, are you unproductive? Are you being not too productive? I think that's too much productivity is the holy grail for businesses. But are we working ourselves into a burnout situation where no one wants employees burning out, and then you've got that cost on the individual and on the company as well. Nevo, wait right there. When we return, we'll continue this fascinating conversation on work from home, living at work, call it what you will. It certainly seems like it's here to stay. Welcome back to the Big Small Business Show with me, Michael Avery. We're talking about working from home. I've got Nevo Hadas in the Zoom room. He's working from home and sharing some advice on company policies, how this trend is going to be impacting business and employees. And the point we left on, Nevo, was the fact that we're working harder. That's certainly what the research is finding. We're working longer hours. How is this going to then affect remuneration packages? Surely we should be seeing increases in remuneration if we're putting in the extra hours.
So I think remuneration in general for work from home is an interesting question, because it's gone from being a requirement that you had to do in emergency or was being seen as a benefit to actually something that will be involved in the perks and in people's pay structures. So what we're expecting to see, and what again the research is showing, what we know conversations we've had with our clients has been, is that they will start looking at work from home benefit packages to cover obviously your internet, so people can get better places to live, so that they basically kind of have a home office environment, because that's really a critical requirement for working from home successfully in the long term. And all of these actions will happen so that they can actually reduce their property costs over time. So companies are realizing that if I want to reduce my office space, if I want to be able to consolidate and reduce not just office space, but parking bays, meeting rooms, all the kind of costs and overheads that go with that.
Big fixed overheads, yeah.
Big fixed overheads. And you just saw like big companies like Fujitsu are targeting 50% lease reductions, which is about an $800 million lease cost reduction over a 5-year period. If you look at these kind of things, how do I now enable my employees to work effectively? And it's a lot more cost effective and a lot cheaper to rather pay my employees a little bit more specifically towards getting a better work from home environment than necessarily taking out a big office space.
Right. And these shifts are happening. I mean, I think that's an important conversation that we're now just starting to open up, because I think many initially loved the novelty of working from home, but are now realizing that all of those expenses that were traditionally borne by the company, air conditioning in winter or summer, internet costs, all of those overheads were borne by the company are now being borne by the employee. So surely there's a big conversation that needs to happen here to renegotiate that contract between the employee and the employer to cover all of those expenses that have been shifted off the company balance sheet onto the individual's personal balance sheet.
100%. And I think this is where it's such a critical component for companies to really understand and have a very clear policy and strategy of what they want to do. If they end up keeping their offices and paying people to work from home, they just end up with double the costs. What they really need to understand is, what will my property size downshift be, right? How much cash or capital am I freeing up to now reutilize it to compensate employees? Which employees actually need these benefits more than others, especially in a society as unequal as South Africa? There's a lot of people that can't work from home. What are the strategies around that? Are we going to pay those? Are we going to focus our benefits on lower income brackets so they can move into better accommodation? What are the things we're going to do there? So I think there's a lot to look at in these environments, not just from a point of view of purely effectiveness and productivity, but also from a sense of fairness and distribution.
And that has huge ramifications, as you mentioned, in a society like ours, where the spatial legacies of apartheid mean people still live very far from their place of work. If companies can now bring them closer to their place of work, you're having those net positive impacts on society as well. The other big question, I guess, we're grappling with at the moment, we were pre-COVID, is this whole issue of around the size of the week, which is almost a legacy issue from an industrial era. Do you think we'll move to a 4-day work week with all of these gains in productivity, potentially freeing up more leisure time and more time for us to go out and spend?
So we're definitely seeing these big shifts. And I think the 4-day work week, or at least the 4.5-day work week are definitely on their way and coming very quickly. Just the gains from not having to commute backwards and forwards, and those extra productivity hours employers gain there, could automatically cover a day of additional effectiveness that employers are getting. So to see companies moving towards 4.5 days as an initial stance, I think makes perfect sense. And it's growing in acceptance. What's happened globally before COVID was that the 4-day work week often happened more at senior levels and had a reduction in salary attached to it. So you could hire a more senior person at a lower cost because they didn't have to work 5 days a week for you, and they would exchange that 1 day of free time for a lower salary. What we expect to happen more and more in the future is actually a multi-generational workplace. So everyone from 60 plus people that are at post-retirement age all the way to younger people coming into the workplace, and rather using the flexibility of shorter work weeks as a way to increase the talent pool and diversity you have in your organization. So somebody that is retired could still choose to work 2 or 3 days a week quite easily, especially if it's from home, and kind of contribute to the company still, or contribute their skills and do that more effectively and help the company grow more without having to have a full payroll impact.
Speaking of days of the week, is it actually possible to change employee contracts from hour-based work to outcome-based work if we're moving in this direction?
So, it depends on which ones you're looking at. So I think there's two very interesting questions around employee contracts. A lot of the stuff we deal with global companies, and the question comes up of, where does this person work? In other words, if I live in South Africa, but I'm actually reporting to a boss in the UK, because now I work from home, that's not a problem. Am I employed under UK law or South African law? That's question one. Question two is, I think, from the hours versus output based one, actually comes down to a question of tax. If you look at how SARS deals with employees, there's a whole lot of different checks and balances they're putting in place to look at it, and to say to people, look, you don't have to be there from 9 to 5, but rather to deliver this piece of work. Once you actually be focused on a piece of work delivery, you see more as an independent contractor than necessarily an employee. So that changes that contract too. The other way to do it is also to say, versus 95 hours, you have to supply maybe 30 or 40 hours of work. But now you have to ask the question, how do I monitor that you've delivered your 30 or 40 hours of work? So as you go away from this old school industrial mindset where it was easy to manage because you got to your desk and I didn't care what you did there from 9 to 5, as long as you were there, you met the requirement of the contract. Suddenly all these structures fall apart, and we don't necessarily have answers for them yet without changing how the company works and operates internally. So those are the challenges the companies are really looking at as they start looking at their future policies of how they meet these challenges. managers.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, greater flexibility also produces these savings, which can certainly help companies build resilience against any future economic shocks as well. So fascinating chatting to you. Nevo Hadas, partner at DYDX, with the future of working from home. And that's a curtain call from me, Michael Avery. It's been a lot of fun filling in for Alon Reyes during lockdown, but normal programming resumes from next week. Special thanks to Morena for making my life so easy with all of her excellent production skills, and to you for tuning in. Keep fighting the good fight.